Welcome. I'm here with Dennis, and we're putting together this information exclusively for the National FinTech Organization, talking about revenue generation. Dennis has some great thoughts for us coming up about improving satisfaction in the buying process and how to solidify that model into something that helps build your company. So, Dennis, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience helping FinTechs grow and with private equity firms and your work at OrangeGrid?
Hey, thanks so much, Heather. Really great to be with you today. Yeah, so I've been in fintech my entire career, and I do a lot of transformation work. So I come into companies that either need a new avenue for growth or kind of a reset. And we typically look at what the strategy is and make whatever adjustments are necessary to the product or service and staffing and pricing model and stuff like that, and then go out and hit the market and really adjust the revenue generation model. So currently I'm at OrangeGrid. I am the corporate development officer there, and I started out as chief product officer, came in similar story. Our product, GridTrax, is a no-code, low-code workflow platform. So it takes a lot of the common software objects that developers would normally use, dashboards and tasking and things like that. And it puts them in the hands of common business users so that they can configure workflow processes to track elements of their business and take care and be more efficient and effective, right? So that's fantastic. And in the first stages of the fintech, they came up with a great set of banking and financial institution clients. What we've done more recently is take a number of our use cases that have had a lot of penetration and where there's a lot of economic demand for that. And we built some productized use cases of that we call Grid Ready and Grid Source. And so specifically in the mortgage industry, we built a whole suite of products or use cases that manage the default process. And there's a vendor management ecosystem around that called Grid Source, so that all the vendors and the clients can interact in the same technology. So it's pretty exciting. Our company's growing. It's a great time to be at OrangeGrid, and happy to be with you today.
Likewise. I like it. Well, let's talk about that growth and how you've been able to map it out and what other fintechs in your same space can do now. Now, we have a lot of fintechs listening that are probably really growing and at that stage of building their revenue generation models and trying to figure out how they get to the next step in this process for sales and growth in general. So let's talk about some experience you've had there. And I know you've been studying a lot from case studies that we've seen, and going through William Mills Agency, we've seen companies do this time and time again, and we'll help everyone go through best practices.
Yeah, sure. And what we're going to talk about today is accelerating your sales by avoiding some buyer dissatisfaction. And yeah, this is based upon some academic research that really goes back to a consulting firm that I was in, earlier in my career. But I've applied these same concepts, either in, as a consultant or in companies that I've worked for as an operator, and just like an OrangeGrid today. So we'll refer some to the research, and we'll also talk about, in practice, how this really can help a fintech accelerate their sales process. So, the place to start is, some common misperceptions of sellers, and that, picture, you don't want to be that guy, right? The picture's a little bit dated. Folks are wearing suits and they're pointing to pieces of paper and stuff like that, whereas today we do it virtually and all that. But you don't want to give a sales presentation where you're putting everybody to sleep, right? And the first piece of this is a lot of times sellers think, wow, the buyers have got to be wowed with features and functionality, right? All the bells and whistles of our system, we have to go through and demo that to the nth degree, right? Reality is, you generally don't have a lot of time in a demo, and the attention span of the people you're showing it to is not very long either, right? And so, you need to hit the main high points, right? If they want to see more detail, they'll ask you, and you can go from there. But that's a really important misperception to avoid right out the gate.
You're right. And a lot of times I think fintechs go in thinking all of their features and bells and whistles are just the best of the best. And there's a lot of extremes used here. We are the first, we are the only. it just goes right in one ear, not the other for these bankers. It's a level of trust that needs to be established from that. There's a hard hitting data that we can use and skip a
Yeah,
lot of the fluff that happens to make its way in.
absolutely. I mean, everyone has experience going through the demo from hell, right? Um, hey, the next one is, and this is a big one, price sells software. And this one is a little bit of an irony in the financial services context, right? Particularly earlier stage, fintechs, you may not have a pricing model, or you're still trying to figure out how to best price your software. And, it's like, what's the minimum we can get by with, in order to get this deal done? That typically blows up in your face. I mean, a lot of financial services buyers, look, I mean, that'll generate two things in their mind, right? One is that, hey, you get what you pay for, right? If the price is too low, the software sucks, right? And so they don't want that. And then secondly, they think that, well, you're an unstable vendor, right? You're desperate. And so you have to be very careful in terms of how you price your software. The third thing, and hopefully you're not dealing with this type of buyer, if they're not the most scrupulous buyer in the world, they may, take you up on it, right? And kind of take advantage of you. And then you've got a bad deal in your hands. So you have to be really careful about how you price your product.
Also remembering that the big guys can come in cheap too. So if you're battling on price, if you're becoming that commodity, you can get some of these larger vendors that can undercut you at any stage of the way. So I don't know how much you've seen of that in the process, but there might be a very less caliber solution that comes in and they can give it away for free as part of a package deal or thing. So battling on price is hard for someone with a novel solution that they're offering out there.
You're going to have to give price concessions from time to time. That's part of the game, right? But you need to be adamant about the value that you bring, and if you've got a fair price for it, you have to assert it, right? Bottom line, right? Third one, going across kind of still clockwise, buyers want a solution now. Oh my gosh, this is almost always a trap, right? I can't tell you how many times, Heather, I've had salespeople come to me and say, Dennis, you know what? We had this deal, right? I just got this call. They're going to pause the RFP for us, although we weren't involved in the RFP, right? If we do the demo, bring a contract because we're going to get the deal. I mean, that almost never works. Okay. First of all, the sales cycle in financial services is long. Okay. So if they're telling you it's short, that's probably not true, right? Secondly, if they're pausing an RFP or something like that, well, at best, they're probably fishing. At worst, they're trying to get some market intel to, enhance their negotiation with somebody else. So be super careful when you hear like this one's going to happen now, right?
Market intel is a big piece, and helping them with someone that's already the incumbent, you fall into wasting a lot of time and rushing things and stopping processes that are in your way. But I think your biggest point here that people neglect, you mentioned how long that sales cycle is. And I feel that a lot of fintechs aren't prepared to handle the length of some of these sales cycles. They have an amazing solution and a great step, and maybe their first customer fell through from an M&A deal or something else that happened, and then the sales cycle can take advantage of them if you're not prepared and know that it does take some time.
It takes a long time, and we'll talk about that in a minute in terms of the funnel, right? But if it's too good to be true, it probably is, right?
Fair enough.
Looking at the lower left, buyers don't care about the stability of the vendor or support capabilities. And okay, if you're in financial services, or if you're catering to financial buyers, there's vendor management concerns you're going to have to jump through, right? And we'll talk in a minute about taking that stuff and looking at it up front. But support, right? Financial institutions, they don't like it if you don't answer the phone. They need to feel like that you are going to be there for them and for your product. And it kind of goes back to the whole price thing, right? You have to build that into your pricing model. It's going to cost you money to be able to support your customers. Understand that's part of the package, right?
Very, very true. We'll go more into this, and I want to talk more about how to prepare and help banks prepare for their regulators and for all the security concerns, but it's all a big piece of the package. And the simpler you can make this and be prepared for this, the easier and the more prepared and responsible you look as a vendor too.
Heck yeah. Last thing, this is a big trap. Buyers are ready and capable of transitioning to a new system or solution. Okay, a couple things here. One is, financial institutions, their job is to deliver financial products and manage assets and deal with their customers, right? That's what they do all day, every day. They typically often don't have software implementation skills, right? You may be dealing with a business buyer that's never been through a software implementation, right? So they don't really know what that's like, right? And you have to coach them through that. And secondly, a lot of financial institutions have legacy systems, and they've had these things forever, right? And they also have built all kinds of other things, spreadsheets and databases and other stuff to fill the gaps, manual processes. They may not be capable of really understanding how your solution is going to replace a lot of that stuff. And particularly if you're really a new piece of fintech technology that's going to bring a whole new process to them they don't currently do, you have to help them envision that. And it requires a lot of skill as a salesperson to not only make them aware of it, but also make them feel confident that you're going to help them and it's going to be okay. This is not a situation where you can just turn over the keys, right? It's going to be your technology is going to be disruptive, most likely, no matter what the context is.
Now, this is easy to do when you've got a few case studies, when you can show how I've worked with these different banks and with these different core providers. But what do you do? How do you show and prove that in the very beginning? Or how do you set expectations for what that process might look like?
You have to be very inquisitive, which is a great segue to, kind of our next point of conversation here. Actually, we'll come to that in just a second, but you really have to, understand the buyer's problem and show that you understand the business context. And even if the particular solution is not exactly the use case, you have to describe what the process was like for a client that you've had before and how they struggle with this piece or that part of the project, and you all helped them. I mean, the kickoff of any project, even if it's a relatively simple SaaS project that you can turn on, make sure you walk the client up front through what they should expect going forward, and what their responsibilities are going to be in terms of business analysis, data connection, things like that. And that will open their eyes a little bit in terms of what lies ahead for them. And again, you have to do it in a way that is very consultative so that they don't get scared off, right?
Right. And those first couple of customers realize that what they're doing is very innovative, and finding them customers that are more prone and welcome to those innovative processes. They should understand what that looks like to be those beta and alpha clients, and they should understand, but setting expectations can be key there as you work through these.
Expectations are everything. And expectations comes from recognizing, what really matters to the buyer, right? So this slide is all about the academic research behind some of this, right? And it's an interesting thing. So on the left, you have the seller's view of the world, right? And, typically in fintech, it's all about product features and functionality, right? Our product it's got all the whiz bang bells and whistles, and it's so much better than all the legacy systems. And, can you believe that people are still using these systems and have been around forever and all that kind of stuff, right? And oh, by the way, we also have to be really cool. We have to have a really cool logo and website, and, we have to, look and feel like a tech company, for buyers to think that, we're somebody we want to do business with. And there's some other things they care about, but in the gray area there, but that's we can finesse that because we're cool and because our product is great, right? Well, the research shows that the view of the world on the right is really, what a financial services buyer cares about, right? And they care about tangible, product functionality, but you can see that circle is a lot smaller, right? And yeah, they care about your brand and image. They don't want to be associated with, like if you're a tech company and you have a bad website, that doesn't make sense to them, right? They're gonna think that's a problem, right? But looking at these gray areas, man, there's a lot more to the pie and to the puzzle than most fintechs think, right? Starting out with reliability. Oh my goodness. Okay. Financial services companies are dealing with people's money. The system has to work. You cannot have data errors. They have to believe that it's like a light switch. They press the button and the lights come on, right? First thing out of the gate, they have to have confidence in the reliability of your system, right?
What are some examples like downtime and other things there that people might need to point out in advance that they have those as table stakes?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to have SLAs in your contract, right? Go ahead and talk about them. Go ahead and talk about your performance. Go ahead and talk about how you measure it and how you respond to issues, right? Go ahead and be proactive about that, right? And that bleeds right into responsiveness, right? Look, things break, particularly software, right? And even worse than that, if you're selling an on-prem solution to a financial institution, there's going to be servers and networking and stuff that they have to buy, right? Things are going to go down, right? And so they have to feel confident that you're going to be there for them, that, whatever method that you provide for support, phone, email, ticketing system, whatever, that it's going to get dealt with quickly, right? You may not have the answer, but you're working on it. You're going to give them updates on a certain period of time, right? Communication, Heather, we could probably talk for 4 hours about communication, right? I mean, and this is your sweet spot, even more so than me, right? It's quantity of communication, it's quality of communication, it's method of communication. I mean, yes, all of that, right? Right.
It's so true. And these are where glowing referrals are made of the end users and the clients and banks that I speak to all the time. Communication and responsiveness is where they just fall in love with their vendor. If they're always there for them when you need them, they're always trying to help. It doesn't need to be the solution that's provided immediately in real time, but working together with them and being a partner with them in this process is where you hear the bankers start to glow about their recommendations.
Yeah. Ease of doing business. This one's a little bit more subtle. I mean, obviously responsiveness and communication goes into that, but stuff happens, right? The economies go up and down. Every now and again, the client may ask you for a price concession. They may ask you to do something for free. They may ask you to change the colors of a screen. They may ask you to have extra staffing at the month end because they've got a big project. They got to close some books or something like that. How are you going to respond to that? I mean, unfortunately, a lot of fintechs, are tech dominated, and these are hassles. They don't want to deal with it, right? I mean, why do you care what the screen color is? I mean, I don't want my guys to have to stay a couple of extra hours, till 7 o'clock on a Friday night at the end of the month. In this market, that attitude doesn't work, right? The client needs to feel like, you care about them, you're there for them, you're investing in the relationship, and you're going to be an easy vendor to work with. Right? Overall cost effectiveness, some financial institutions are typically really good at, building spreadsheets, right? That's what they do. And they will know how to model out the cost of your system. And that could be just as simple as a SaaS license fee that recurs every month, or it could be an on-prem situation. There's servers and networks and licenses and stuff like that they have to buy, desktops or whatever. But the one thing that they may not be always aware of is, what are other cost items that your system can save them, right? Obviously, if you're competing with a legacy system, there may be some software licenses that go away. But, how about headcount savings by virtue of processes that are now been automated, right? How about the overhead associated with that headcount savings, right? How about mistakes that you're avoiding making because now this system takes care of things that were previously tracked manually or something like that? This is actually an opportunity, for the fintech to show the value proposition, right? So it's really important that you think about the overall cost effectiveness of your system.
Absolutely. And a lot of them now are making data more readily available. There's an openness to them where there's more sales opportunities. There's a lot more available to the bank and the end user there. So I think looking into what the prospect of that is can help a lot as well.
Yeah, no question about it. Competence, it's a two-headed monster, right? For competence, clients expect you to be technically competent, and if you're not technically competent, you're not going to be in the business for very long, right? But they also expect you to have some business competence, right? They don't expect you to know to gory detail their problem, but they expect you to know the business context of their problem, and to be able to show that you speak their language, you understand the terminology, that you understand generally how their type of business are structured and where your software fits into that. If you come out of the blue and you don't understand the market that you're in, suggest you find some folks to help you, get on your staff, right? And professionals like you all to help, deliver that message, right?
Hands down. There are a lot of people that come from outside the space, and the nuances to the terms used. If you walk into a credit union and start talking about their customers, that's enough to end a meeting for a lot of executives right there. So hiring someone that's had experience in the financial institution world, that helps a ton. There's a lot of good consultants available too, and associations to get involved with, where they'll be coaching you along the way about how to make that nuance and to fit into that space, the niche where you are the best fit. And I think that helps with the goals too, because you've probably seen a lot of fintechs come into the space and not know if they want to start with targeting banks or credit unions or retailers, how to put these ecosystems together. And that takes a lot of industry nuances as well.
Big time. I mean, you do not approach credit unions the way you do banks, right? And I can tell you how many times I have had either clients or companies that I work for have said, well, our solution has all this penetration in the banking sector. There's a million credit unions we're going to go and sell to. And I'm like, you don't understand. You're talking about apples and oranges, right? And okay, at 50,000 feet, some of the concepts are the same, but the environment, the concerns that their view of why they buy is totally different, right? Last thing is ROI. I mean, and we talk a lot about this in the context of cost effectiveness, but the other piece of this is opportunity cost or revenue capture, two different sides of the same coin, right? A well-crafted ROI model will take that into account. And again, this is something in my experience that a lot of financial services buyers aren't very good at. They are good at, P&L type things, backward looking financial analysis, but forecasting the impact of your technology on their business, not just the cost side of it, but also the revenue side of it, it may not be something that they're really good at, or haven't thought through. And, this is an opportunity for you to do some consultative selling, right? If you have a great ROI model, and there are a million of them out there, you can download them off the internet, right? But I mean, an ROI model should have both revenue and cost components to it, and a cost of capital associated with the acquisition of the technology. But having revenue items in there will open their eyes. They'll be like, wow, okay, yeah, this technology can help us grow our business, right? So that's important. Right?
Your message here on this slide should be very encouraging to younger fintechs and those just starting off because they don't have the brand and reputation yet that a lot of their competitors may. We're still growing that. It takes years to develop that process, and this really equation can give them those tangible pieces. We're calling them intangibles, but they can take these and build them into something that's very consultative and functional for them that sets across their differentiators. And what stage company do you see being able to make the biggest difference out of this, and where do they need to start focusing? When do they need to start focusing on this?
I mean, I think the way this is organized, the seller's view on this slide is almost any startup, right?
Mhm.
They're going to focus, and it's the right thing for them to do. You can't sell what you ain't got, right? So you got to build the product, right? But if you have an idea, and I mean, I just have so much respect for those entrepreneurs that come up with, disruptive ideas. And you express that in a product, and you start to get out into the marketplace. If then you can, adjust your messaging to address the points that are on this buyer's view, that's when you'll see your sales accelerate, right? And again, you have an opportunity. They've given you their time because they want to hear about your product. You have an opportunity to say whatever you want. The point is to make sure the message covers these bases, right? And here's why. Show you the next slide. This is what the academic research shows, right? So, this is what, makes buyers angry about the process, okay? No surprise there, a good third of them are upset because of reliability issues. If the product don't work, they're going to be unhappy. Again, they are dealing with very sensitive financial data that has to be accurate. Your system has to work. They need to be able to sleep at night, that no one of all the other things they got to worry about, they ain't got to worry about your system, right? About a third of them too about responsiveness. Okay, a great working system can easily come undone because they put in a ticket or they have a question, they don't understand something, and you blow them off, right? However you're dealing with them, you got to deal with it quick, right?
Mm-hmm. Hard response and communication we've been talking about time and time again. And I think a lot of times it's one person at the company trying to manage all the customers. It might be the founder, CEO, and president. So it might be that support comes in earlier than you think it would. But what are some things that they can do that you've seen work well to help with responsiveness?
Yeah, it's a problem because in fintech, hey, you're starting out, or you're at early stage or in seed rounds or even early stage, financial backing, and you're going to devote most of your resources into tech, right? Okay, the next thing you're going to put money into is sales and marketing, probably, right? And then you got to have some overhead infrastructure, and then you kind of work your way towards support. You got to leapfrog that a little bit, right? We'll talk about this at the end, but as I said before, your buyers typically don't have a lot of skill sets in terms of deploying software. They're good at what they do, which is selling financial services products and managing them, right? Your technologists typically maybe not have the customer service skills either, right? And so even if you have to have someone on your business development staff that kind of wears two hats, they're going to be much more of an advocate for the client's interests, most likely, than your technologist, right? They'll have a better feeling for the relative weighting of the issues, right? So, make sure that you have those kind of people on staff, and make sure your processes are set up like that, right? I mean, back to reliability. I mean, if you have a ticket come across that is, the system's down, I mean, you pretty much need to fix that now, right? I mean, whatever else you're doing, that one goes to the front of the list, right? So, and you just build that into, your disciplines, right? And then, the next, that's a great segue. The next piece, not meeting commitments, right? Hey, that's another thing for earlier stage fintechs. Clients expect your system to go down. They expect there to be problems. I mean, the internet breaks, right? Okay, And so, if you tell them otherwise, they're not going to believe you, right? So go ahead and admit when you have problems, and the main thing is to be, transparent and honest with the client about what you're doing, right? If you have a fix and it's going to be deployed tomorrow, tell them that, and then make sure it gets deployed tomorrow. Or if something comes up, call them and tell them that it ain't gonna get deployed tomorrow, but maybe it'll get deployed, tell them when it's gonna get deployed, right? Over communicate that. But nothing will, destroy your credibility faster than not meeting your commitments. As a software provider, fintech provider, you can't have that, right?
This is hard too, because you see a lot of companies that want to share their roadmaps, right? So that you see them in their aggressive plans of, we want to have this new web version available and we want to have it out in 6 months. Those need to be kept internal a lot of times. When you start sharing those with clients and they're expecting this in the next 6 months, and you don't know what the roadmap, what the bumps are you're going to hit as you follow this course. Very careful setting dates and timelines on those, because we've seen them backfire a lot of times, and you lose a lot of your credibility when that happens. They can't come to rely on you for that next piece, or they'll start looking elsewhere if they can't trust you to provide what they need coming down the road.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. A lot of that cuts to that persona of the tech company, right? The view that our brand and image is so important, and we need the customers to get excited about what's coming down the pipe. I mean, sure, there's some of that, but they're there to buy something today. And I always say, look, clients want product, not projects, right? What you're selling today needs to work today, right? And you can sell them the other stuff later, right? Don't, because you're setting yourself up to fail, right? If you do that. We talk about communication. I think what's interesting in the latter part of this graph is the relative size of the numbers, right? Technical competence doesn't seem to upset buyers that much, right? Because, again, if you're not technically competent, they're not going to buy, right? The ones I think that are upset are the ones where, you send somebody into the field to look at, well, nowadays, of course, you do it by Zoom or whatever, but, to help them as a business analyst, and this person doesn't know anything about the, industry, they're just a, fresh out consultant or something like that. That makes people upset, right? Because they expect, to have somebody that, can speak the language, even if they don't know the particular business process. Right. Price, another small one. Again, but it makes common sense, right? If you think about it, if they don't like the price, they ain't going to buy, right? So, but here's the punchline of the academic research: tangible features and functionality, 1%. You go back to this graph before. You think it's all about features and functionality? Yeah, really not. It's about all this other stuff, right?
It's true. The only times I've seen price, and tell me what your experience is, but I've seen price upset people when it comes into the experience. If they feel like they're being nickeled and dimed down the road, that's an issue too. So having a stable structure that you're not having to come back to and keep changing, and that goes back to reliability and everything you discussed here as well.
Fantastic point. I mean, they don't know the math behind your pricing model. They got no idea, what it's cost you to build it, what it costs you to maintain it, what it costs you to market it, and they don't care, right? I mean, you've quoted them a price and they bought it. And if, however, they are having certainly reliability issues, responsive issues, or something like that, then it starts to, erode the value proposition, right? And then they're like, you know what, we're paying all this money for this, particularly in a SaaS. Oh man, this kills you in a SaaS model, right? Because it's a recurring expense, right? And look, you're dealing with humans on the other side, right? And everyone has bosses, we have bosses, right? And no one wants to go to their boss and say, yeah, this line item on my budget, yeah, I'm not really happy with what I'm getting for that. That's usually not a good day, right? So how do you avoid it, right? There's two things, right? I mean, we talk about this at the deal level, and we can talk about it more institutionally for the fintechs, right? I mean, Heather, I think the first thing to do is to just account for all of it, as you're going through a deal, right? And here's the irony, like, okay, I don't know about you, but I never go to a store not knowing generally what I want to buy, right? And what features or functionality are going to matter for me, right? I mean, what are the things that are important, right? The clients will tell you if you'll listen to them. And particularly if you're in an RFP situation, it's usually all right there, right? This day and age, I mean, RFPs are big, they're complex, they take forever to deal with, right? But I mean, better than half the RFP has nothing to do with the technology at all. It's all about information security, compliance, vendor management stuff. Maybe there's a couple spreadsheets in there about, features and functionality, but you're going to spend a lot of your time answering questions that have nothing to do with the product, right? So you'll learn a lot from that and any other specifications that they give you,
Yeah, absolutely.
Observing roles and body language, in your communication, hey, you can't pay enough attention to the nonverbal stuff. These days we do a lot more stuff virtually, but it's great when people put their cameras on, right? You don't want to be that guy that is putting people to sleep in the presentation. Stop and ask questions. I can't stand sitting through sales presentations where the salesperson takes all the space in the room, right? And again, buyers will tell you if you ask, how's this working for you guys? Are we covering the right things? Just ask them, right?
It's foreshadowing to how the rest of the partnership's going to go. Will it be an open communication? Will you be acting as a partner or a vendor? Because building together and listening in the beginning is how that all starts and how all the good partnership models begin.
Yeah. I think you touched on this next bullet before about proactively addressing issues like support and vendor management. Hey, if you have SLA reports, and certainly hopefully they're good, talk about them, right? We've had X% uptime, right? Our average response time on tickets is this. We resolve X number of tickets per month, right? Lots of folks think, well, that's going to be boring to the business buyers, but you know what you can do? Put it in the deck or whatever written up, thing you may be given to them, because they're going to share that with the vendor management people, and those people care about that. Somebody's going to read it. And if it's out there, you know what, maybe that keeps them from asking a question. Maybe that makes the vendor management process go a little bit faster, right? So why not do that? Next one, add some custom deal elements if feasible, right? I mean, look, in my mind, you always have to protect your product. You always have to protect your pricing, and you always have to protect your contract terms, okay? But outside of that, you can get pretty creative, right? So if a client wants you to give some additional support hours, hey, right? That's not so bad, right? If they want you to brand the web portal a little differently, yeah, maybe that's okay, right? If there's somebody that they have interacted with during the implementation, they really want to be their account executive. If these things are feasible, maybe those are things you throw in there. And hey, I'd much rather do that than make substantial price concessions or give up on contract terms that are important to me, right?
Absolutely.
Last thing, we talked about ROIs. Again, I think, especially if you're dealing with an institutional sale, those things are fantastic. It's hard. It takes time, but it's a great opportunity for you to work with the client in the sales process side by side. And like I said, open up some eyes in terms of the impact that it's going to have for them and their business. Pilots, I love if you can do this, particularly if you're a SaaS company, right? We've all been trained in our consumer world. Anything you want to buy on a subscription basis comes with a free trial period or something like that. If you can enable a sandbox for a client to play with a little bit, they're going to love that, and that'll help you close the deal.
Absolutely. And they've already invested the time at that point. They're already in with you as they're working through that sandbox environment. So it's a great way to start their relationship and manage expectations too. They know what to do. They know how to prepare. It's all can work out wonderfully.
Can't lose. talking about institutionalizing some of this in your pipeline. I mean, again, we could talk for hours about this. The point really here is to ensure that you take account for these non-feature and functionality issues as you're building your revenue generation engine and all your disciplines, right? We put on here, what I think is a pretty good, fintech sales funnel and all the activities that are happening at the various funnel stages. I mean, there's a million funnels you can go out there and get on the internet. The classic one is the Miller-Hyman model, and they talk about covering all the bases, all the different buying influences and all that. Point here really is, to be aware of these non-feature and functionality sources of dissatisfaction early, and to harvest the intelligence that you get at each stage, and make sure that someone's working those problems as you work your way through, right? If a vendor management, concern is out there, you better be working on it, no matter how much, the business, wants your software, and build those into the qualifications that enable, you and your internal CRM or whatever, however you have this set up, to move a deal from one stage to the next. Because I mean, your CRM should go right into your financial model, and you don't want to call the deal at proposal stage when it's actually stuck really at the demo and qualifying stage because they're not really happy with your support model or something like that.
Mhm.
And then last thing, and this is the segue to the next thing, is go ahead and think about, you want your handoff between your sales executive or business development executive and your account executive to be very smooth and sticky and kind of messy, right? A great salesperson builds great relationships, or a team of salespeople builds great relationships with the client. They don't want them to go away so soon, right? And they want their account executive to have even better relationships. So those things kind of need to, that needs to be managed, and you need to bring those people in. I always say, like, look, imagine the client or they're like attendees at a play in a theater, right? And you are the stage manager, and you're letting them see whatever actors you want them to see when you want them to see them. So make sure you bring these people in anticipation of that deal getting closed.
Absolutely. We're blurring the lines between the roles, and that makes the seamless transition that we need to have. So they don't feel like they've had a switch of people, or that all the trust built in the beginning of the process is gone, and we're starting again as we go into this next stage.
Yep. Because here's what you want. You want your relationship with your client to be a nice picnic on a spring day in a field of wildflowers with a bottle of wine, right? Business is personal. Financial services business is extremely personal, right?
Mm-hmm.
To win and to maintain continuity, you have to have fantastic support in this industry, right? And you have to have an account executive that understands that and that is working hard every day to ensure that his or her accounts are as close to a bright spring sunny day as possible. Right. A couple of final points on that and aftercare, as you implement, and I said this before, that's a whole different skill set than, building and maintaining product. Keep that implementation staff separate. However, your account executive also has to have a direct line to the technical staff. As I said before, if there are tickets out there that relate to certainly reliability issues and stuff like that, that account executive needs to have confidence that he or she can get that issue resolved, and that they are getting straight factual information from the technical staff that they can then message the client. They can choose how they want to message it. They can choose when they want to message it, but they need to know the true facts so that they can be credible in their interactions with the client.
Absolutely. there needs to be a level of comfort there in that communication. So when we do hit the bumps in the road, it can be smoothed out and everyone's happy with how it's being dealt with. You've got a flow going both ways between the client and the fintech as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you can have a nice long picnic, hopefully, with the client for a very long time. These relationships are intended to be long term.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you think about it, all the, legacy software. I mean, you're talking decades in some cases, right? So, well managed sales process that takes into account all this stuff is going to accelerate your sales and grow your company.
So, Dennis, you have a white paper available on this subject as well that digs into the details, and we'll have available on the NFO website. A next question and step, just to be applicable to help people grow into these stages. I understand as fintechs are hitting their growth cycles, there are transitory periods where you're going from that first couple of clients into something bigger. As you make that move from maybe your first handful of clients, and we're starting to really multiply and scale the products. So you consulted with people that do interim CROs, or we know a few good sales consultants that can step in and help build that pipeline and process. What are best practices you've seen there in the growth stages?
I think it's a great thing to bring in a consultant or an interim CRO. That's always an investment that's hard for fintechs to make because, as I said before, your priority typically waterfall is technology and then maybe business development and some other overhead. And, but building a mechanized approach to revenue generation is what causes growth to accelerate, right? And a CRO, whether you can afford one full time or you bring in a consultant, is going to do the things that are going to kind of knit it together, right? Most likely, you have built your product and you've sold it to, a cohort of customers that either are folks that you may have relationships with prior, or they're word of mouth sales, or you've done some marketing and there's been some inbound opportunity, right? But what really, drives growth of the business is inbound leads, right? And so that's going to require some research about the market. That's going to require some more finely tuned targeting. That's going to require leveraging all the kind of content marketing and messaging, the stuff that you guys do. And it's really going to require setting up a system, going back to that funnel, that is going to be tracking key metrics, right? Because, in the old days, we used to say, okay, it takes 10 opportunities to get to 3 prospects to get to 1 deal, right? Your mileage is going to vary, right? But ultimately, that 1 deal goes into the pile that drives your financial model, right? So you kind of have to work right to left and say, okay, in order to get to X, revenue growth, we're going to need to get to X times whatever in terms of opportunities in the pipeline and work our way through it. So the most recent article that I wrote, Brian Wilson has a fantastic podcast out there about reverse engineering your funnel, right? And really kind of working from number of actually closed deals backwards to the funnel in terms of opportunities. That's the kind of thing that a good CRM can do. And then the last thing, and I think this is almost more of a generic executive management tip, right? Conventional wisdom often is that, CEO types especially are supposed to delegate everything and be high-flying visionaries and all that kind of stuff, right? The reality is you need to be a manager, right? And you need to focus every day on what everyone's job is in order to move the ball down the field, right? And so to do that, you have to set up processes, right? I mean, have a weekly meeting with your folks that goes through the funnel, and from a metric standpoint, don't just talk about deals and things you can go do. How many are at this stage? and which, they shouldn't have been, it's great to set up timeframes. Okay, I'd like to have them be in the demo stage for 2 months, right? Okay, those that have been there for longer than that, let's go through each one of those and figure out what we can do to get it moving forward. Or, in some cases, you got to walk away from deals because you're wasting your time, right? So those are processes, and sometimes it's hard for CEOs, especially if they're kind of having to wear the CRO hat too, to set that stuff up. Bring in somebody that's done it and let them govern it for a while, and then they can turn it over to you, and then if it grows and it works, then you can hire somebody to come in full time and do that, and you don't do it anymore. You delegate it to them.
It's a great stepping stone. And that can go, like you were talking, on content marketing. It goes on that side as well. We've got agencies like us that can come and step in and help with the content marketing. There's fractional CMOs. There's a lot of pieces that you can step in, so you're building in the right direction before you're ready to make that full-time hire.
Exactly. But it starts with, the process. And if you deploy that, and you're going to make mistakes, and things you thought were going to work out didn't work out. Just because it didn't work out doesn't mean it was a mistake. Okay, right? But that discipline, just like the discipline you put into building your product, is what's going to grow the business.
Well said. Well, I thank you for your time, Dennis. It was good to break this down with you and learn a lot of takeaways that we should be applying into these systems and processes. And I hope this has helped a lot of the fintechs building this right now. We will come back again and speak more with you later down the line.
Thanks, Heather. It's been great. Appreciate the time.